Hi, Cubs. We're going to continue our reading of the Phantom Tollbooth. Now, Friday, I asked you for character traits for King Azaz, and Trinity said he was not calm. Nishrita said he was unkind. Mason said he was serious, and both Srivasa and Sarvansh agreed. Houston said he's mean because he's impatient. So kind of impatient. And Shreya says he's a word lover. I think that these are all great descriptions of King Azaz. Really, that serious one, he doesn't seem to have like jokes or play around. So right now, that serious one is a very serious trait is a good one to choose. Impatient, he is sometimes. I don't know if it's enough to say that he's always impatient. So we need to pay attention to that in this chapter and then make a decision. And unkind, again, he might have been unkind somewhat, but he did invite everybody inside his castle, his house, his book, whatever you want to call it, to eat with him. So maybe he's not completely unkind, but he and the math magician do put rhyme and reason in the castle in the air. And I said, based on Fairly Macabre's story, that he was, no one said this one, but argumentative. I mean, he likes to argue. I have some friends who like to argue in our class. You could also say that he's stubborn. Maybe that means like you're stuck in your ways. You don't give in very easily. Even when you know you're wrong, you still keep on, keep on going. And grouchy is another word that I thought of because that kind of goes with that unkind thing, right? He's grouchy. So let's see if any of those descriptions still hold true in our next chapter, all right? Chapter 8, The Humbug Volunteers. I couldn't eat another thing, puffed the Duke, clutching his stomach. Oh dear, oh dear. Oh my, oh dear, agreed the minister, breathing with great difficulty. Mumbled the Earl, desperately trying to swallow another mouthful. Thoroughly stuffed, sighed the Count, loosening his belt. Full up, grunted the Under-Secretary, reaching for the last cake. As everyone finished, the only sounds to be heard were the creaking of chairs, the pushing of plates, and the licking of spoons, and of course, a few words from the humbug. A delightful repast, delicately prepared and elegantly served, he announced to no one in particular. A feast of rare bouquet. My compliments to the chef. By all means, my compliments to the chef. Then, with a most distressed look on his face, he turned to Milo and gasped. So distressed, what does distress mean here? Well, he's got a distressed look on his face, and then he turned to Milo and goes, so distress must mean worried. Sorry, Miss Kilburn, I needed some water. Must mean worried. Oh, speaking of water, would you kindly fetch me a glass of water? I seem to have a touch of indigestion. Perhaps you've eaten much too quickly, Milo remarked sympathetically. Too much, too quickly. Too much, too quickly, wheezed the uncomfortable Bug between gulps. To be sure, too much too quickly. I most certainly should have eaten too little too slowly, or much too slowly, or too little too quickly, or taken all day to eat nothing, or eaten everything in no time, or occasionally eaten something any time. Perhaps I should have... He toppled back, exhausted, into his chair, and continued to mumble indistinctly. Attention! Let me have your attention, insisted the king, leaping to his feet and pounding the table. The command was entirely unnecessary, for the moment he began to speak, everyone but Milo, Talk, and the distraught Bug rushed from the hall down the stairs and out of the palace. So everybody else ran away, except for the three of them. "Loyal subjects and friends," continued Azaz, his voice echoing in an almost empty room. "Once again on this gala occasion, we have..." "Pardon me?" coughed Milo as politely as possible. "But everyone is gone. Gone." "I was hoping that no one would notice," said King sadly. "This happens every time." "They've all gone to dinner," announced the Humbug. "They just ate." "There's the king, said the bug weakly. "Just as soon as I catch my breath, I will join them." "Well, that's ridiculous. How can they eat dinner right after a banquet?" asked Milo. "Scandalous!" shouted the king. "We'll put a stop to it at once. From now on, by royal command, everyone must eat dinner before the banquet." "But that's just as bad," protested Milo. "You mean just as good," corrected the bug. Things which are equally bad are also equally good. Try to look on the bright side of things." "Well, I don't know which side of anything to look at," protested Milo. "Everything is so confusing, and your words only make things worse." "How true," said the unhappy king, resting his regal chin on his royal fist as he thought fondly of the old days. "There must be something we can do about it." "Pass a law," said the Humbug suggested brightly. "We almost have as many laws as words," grumbled the king. "Offer a reward." "Offer a reward," offered the bug again. The king shook his head and looked sadder and sadder. "Send for help. Drive a bargain. Pull the switch. File a brief. Lower the boom. Tow the line. Raise a bridge. Bar the door," shouted the bug, jumping up and down and waving his arms, and he promptly sat back down as the king glanced furiously in his direction. "Perhaps you might allow rhyme and reason to return?" said Milo softly, for he had waited for just such an opportunity to suggest it. "How nice that would be," said Azaz, straightening up and adjusting his crown. "Even if they were a bother at times, things always went so well when they were here." As he spoke, he leaned back on his throne, clasped his hands behind his head, and stared thoughtfully at the ceiling. Why don't you do that right now? I'm going to reread it, and I want you to pretend like you're King Azaz and do what he's doing right now. As he spoke, he leaned back on the throne, clasped his hands behind his head, and stared thoughtfully at the ceiling. "But I'm afraid it can't be done." "Certainly not, it can't be done," repeated the Humbug. "Why not?" asked Milo. "Why not, indeed?" exclaimed the bug, who seemed equally at home on either side of the argument. "Much too difficult," replied the king. "Of course," emphasized the bug. "Much too difficult." "But you could if you really wanted to," insisted Milo. "By all means. If you really wanted to, you could," the Humbug agreed. "How?" asked Azaz, glaring at the bug. "How?" inquired Milo, looking at the same way. Simple task," began the Humbug, suddenly wishing he were somewhere else. "For a brave lad with a stout heart, a steadfast dog, and a serviceable small automobile." "Go on," commanded the king. "Yes, please," seconded Milo. "All he would have to do," continued the worried bug, "is travel through miles of harrowing and hazardous countryside, into unknown valleys and uncharted forests, past yawning chasms and trackless wastes until he reached Digitopolis. if, of course, he ever reached there, and then he would have to persuade the math magician to agree to release the little princesses, and, of course, he'd never agree if you agreed to anything. He would never agree to anything that you would agree with, and anyway, if he did, you certainly would agree. You certainly wouldn't agree to it. From there, it's the simple matter of entering the mountains of ignorance, full of perilous pitfalls and ominous overtones, a land to which many venture but few return, and whose evil demons slither slowly from peak to peak in search of prey. Then an effortless climb up a 2,000-step circular stairway without railings in a high wind at night. For those in the mountains, it's always night. To the castle in the air. Pause. Does that seem like it is as simple as the humbug? Because he says all that he would have to do. Does that seem like it is as simple as the humbug is making it? No. Seems pretty difficult. He paused momentarily for breath and then began again. After a pleasant chat with the princesses, all that remains is a leisurely ride back through those chaotic crags whose frightening fiends have sworn to tear any intruder from limb and devour him down to his belt buckle. And finally, after a long ride back, a triumphal parade, if of course there is anything left to parade, followed by hot chocolate and cookies for everyone. The humbug bowed low and sat down once again, very pleased with himself. I never realized it would be so easy, said the king, stroking his beard and smiling broadly. Quite simple indeed, concurred the bug. Sounds dangerous to me, said Milo. Most dangerous, mumbled the humbug, still trying to be in agreement with everyone. Who will make the journey? Asked Talk, who had been listening very carefully to the humbug's description. A very good question, replied the king, but there is one far more serious problem. What is it? Asked Milo, who was rather unhappy at the turn of the conversation. I'm going to start that sentence again because I keep messing it up. So here we go. What is that? Asked Milo, who was rather unhappy at the turn the conversation had taken. I'm afraid I can only tell you when you return, cried the king, clapping his hands 3 times. As he did so, the waiters rushed back into the room and quickly cleared away the dishes, the silver, the tablecloth, the table, the chairs, the banquet hall, and the palace, leaving them all suddenly standing in the marketplace. Of course, you realize that I would like to make the trip myself, continued Azaz, striding across the square as if nothing had happened, but since it was your idea, you shall have the honor and fame. You see, began Milo. Dictionopolis will always be grateful, my boy, interrupted the king, throwing one arm around Milo and the patting Talk with the other. You will face many dangers on your journey, but fear not, I have brought you this for your protection. He drew from inside his cape a small, heavy box about the size of a school book and handed it ceremoniously to Milo. In this box are all the words I know, he said. Most of them you will never need, and some you will use constantly. But with them you may ask all the questions which have never been answered, and answer all the questions which have never been asked. All the great books of the past, and all the ones yet to come, are made with these words. With them there is no obstacle you cannot overcome. All you must learn to do is use them well and in the right places. Milo accepted the gift with thanks, and the little group walked to the car, still parked at the edge of the square. You will, of course, need a guide, said the king, and since he knows the obstacles so well, said the king, the humbug has cheerfully volunteered to accompany you. Now, see here, cried the startled bug, for that was the last thing in the world he wanted to do. You will find him dependable, brave, resourceful, and loyal, continued Azaz, and the humbug was so overcome by flattery that he quite forgot to object again. I'm sure he'll be a great help, cried Milo as they drove across the square. I hope so, thought Talk to himself, for he was less sure. Good luck, do be careful, shouted the king, and down the road they went. Milo and Talk wondered what strange adventures lay ahead. The humbug speculated on how he'd ever become involved in such a hazardous undertaking, and the crowd waved and cheered wildly, for while they didn't care at all about anyone arriving, they were always pleased to see someone go. So that's the end of chapter 8. So I want you to think back to those words that we gave to King Azaz. Can you add to the character traits now that we've had some more time to him? Or are you very certain about the ones you posted? Because he was a little different in this chapter, though still the same character. So what traits did you see in last chapter? And what traits did you see in this chapter that overlap? What is something that you have more than one piece of evidence about him as far as a trait? All right? So think about that. Post your trait ideas, whether they're new or they're old and you're just sure of them, to our comments. All right? All right. Happy Monday again, guys.